Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Boruto anime review. This one's going to be for episode 168, which is called Training Begins. And once again, another very good episode of Boruto. I think what's really going for these recent episodes is that as we're getting ever closer to the next manga arc being covered in the anime, the stuff that's actually happening here in the anime that isn't covered in the manga feels more important, because in the manga we just jumped to the next arc and the characters had sort of, increased their powers off screen. But here we're seeing how they did that, why they felt the need to do that after their initial defeat. So that's, I think, what's felt more important in recent episodes, is just seeing the defeat by Deepa and Victor. That is what is prompting Sarada and Boruto to train here. And we're seeing the ways in which they're training. And that's what the strength of this episode was. Of course, Boruto going to Kakashi to get training with the Resengan, and then Sarada going to Sasuke to get training with the Sharingan. So, I suppose we'll cover Sarada and Sasuke first, just because in the grand scheme of this episode, that was the sort of smaller section. Initially, she wants to learn the Chidori, but Sasuke informs her that, to use the Chidori effectively, you need to have 2 Tomoe on your Sharingan. She only has 1. And that you can't just sort of train to unlock the extra parts of the Sharingan, so you just have to push yourself to the extremes. So it's the disappointment she can't learn the jutsu that she wanted, but he does say, okay, instead let's just train your 1 Tomoe Sharingan to be as good as possible, because it's still very, very useful. There's still some ability to train with it. My takeaway from the way the training went is that I think he is using this training as the thing that is going to push Sarada to the extremes, to where she will eventually unlock the 2nd Tomoe. Just because he's sort of leading her down the path of, you should be able to improve, but she isn't improving. But the improvement is going to be, the next stage of the Sharingan, 2 Tomoe. That to me seems like the logical way this is going to go, and then from there she will learn the Chidori. My impression is that the harder part of this is going to be unlocking the Sharingan needed to do the Chidori. Otherwise, I get the impression Sarada should be pretty okay at learning something like that. We'll see how long exactly they do with the training here, how many episodes that this takes, because at least on the Boruto side of the episode, it seems like he's like, okay, he's going to have to practice more to get it down consistent, but he seems to have, found the key piece of information needed to get that right. Whereas with Sarada, she hasn't quite made the breakthrough yet. But in general, I just like this side of the episode. It was a relatively simple training of, he's basically firing all these, ball bearings at her. And this is basically mimicking Deepa's sort of hail of kind of cube bullets things that he was using. And if she can dodge these ball bearings, she'll be able to dodge Deepa. So it's a direct setup to, improve her skills to take on Deepa. Which I thought was really good. And, they're highlighting that, okay, her mistake is perhaps her Sharingan is good for focusing on small amounts of objects, because she can focus on 1 or 2 things and dodge it that way. But she's struggling with the idea of a massive amount of things and not just focusing on one thing. She has to look at the group as a whole and find her path through. And she has to widen her field of vision, not narrow it. So that's an interesting kind of thought process. Obviously, looks like she's getting bruised here, and we see Sakura towards the end of the episode kind of watching on, worried that she's only recently recovered and she's already sort of taking a bit of a beating again. But I just like that concern from her, that Sakura knows that this is training that Sarada needs, but is still concerned for her daughter. That was just a nice thing to see. Similarly, Sasuke being the sort of nice trainer here to Sarada, but also still being, as tough as you expect him to be. And it's just Sarada really appreciating Sarada, sorry, so many S names. Sarada appreciating Sasuke taking the time to actually do the training with her, just showing their, bond that in the grand scheme of the story, they've only really gotten to interact relatively recently, but it's nice to see their dynamic continuing to develop. I suppose switching over to the Boruto side of the episode, this is where they got more technical with it, because with Sarada, she's just, training her like vision, and it's hard to describe really technically what exactly it is that she needs to learn, and she needs to do this before she can learn a specific jutsu. With Boruto, they get straight away into like the technicalities of like amount of chakra needed, chakra nature, the form of chakra as well, all the factors that go into a jutsu, in that they immediately say, oh, what Boruto wants to learn is the giant Resengan, because he views it as like, oh, he can only make a small Resengan that does a small amount of damage, so he'll do Naruto's giant Resengan and that'll increase his power. But Kakashi's just like, no, you can't do that. Naruto can do that because he has the Nine Tails chakra and just in general a huge amount of chakra. You don't have that, so you can't do that. You're going to have to learn to empower your Resengan in a slightly different way. And so he's sort of reluctant, of course, at the start, and he's just like, oh, I'm just going to slightly oversee your training and not directly teach you. Just giving him a few tips along the way. So they go over the whole idea of, okay, these are the 5 chakra natures. I like that they brought up that there is light and shadow, light and dark natures as well. And I think a lot of fans are still like, wait, can you properly explain them? Because they never really got, too heavily explored, in that they seem to be almost like exclusive to Sage of the Six Paths style stuff, and not many characters have it. But, it was a nice tease of like, oh, maybe we'll get into exploring them someday. But either way, it was just getting across the different styles. Boruto's main style is wind, but we know he can do lightning and water also. And so what he's going to have to do is add a change in chakra nature to his Resengan, which is basically like what Naruto's training for the Rasen Shuriken was. But here, Boruto doesn't have the power to create a Rasen Shuriken, so his development here is basically developing the wind style Resengan, which was a little kind of weird towards the end, in that like, wait, Naruto has done this jutsu before. It looks different than Boruto's one, but it seems to in general have the same effect. But of course Naruto never really uses it because he's powerful enough to typically use the full-on Rasen Shuriken. But I like the way they showed it, that Boruto's one, once he gets the understanding of what he needs to do, which is that, okay, you need to, realize you're not alone. That was like the wording that Boruto figured out, to realize that, oh, if I use a shadow clone and use the knowledge, that the Naruto tip of like grinding, it together to sharpen each other, and that's how you get the wind nature involved. His is green, and if I remember correctly, Naruto's wind style Resengan is basically like a really small Rasen Shuriken. It's the ball of the Resengan, and then it has the sort of like shuriken blades kind of slightly coming out, but it's still sort of hold in your hand style thing. Boruto's one is different in that obviously the color changes and it becomes sort of green, and then it doesn't have the shuriken style blades coming out, but it seems to develop a sort of like halo ring, like a kind of like bladed disc around it, almost, and again has the power that you'd expect from something like this. So Boruto seems to have, for the most part, accomplished what he needs to do. It'll be interesting to see what the refinement is going forward, in that, is it just consistency, or is Boruto going to be skilled enough technically to be able to learn to do this without needing a shadow clone? Because that was always the thing with Naruto, is that he wasn't great at the technical side of jutsu, but he had the power and drive to sort of get through the sort of lack of technical prowess. Boruto, on the other hand, has that technical prowess but doesn't have the huge chakra reserves, so he might actually be able to get this down to the point where he can just on his own generate the wind style Resengan in his hand. And I'm assuming that's what they're going to eventually build towards. The other thing with this is that they kind of further explain Boruto's vanishing Resengan, establishing that it is a incomplete jutsu that is the lightning style incorporated into the Resengan, which I don't think we fully knew before. I think the novelization of the Boruto movie said it was wind, but they seem to have sort of retconned that and figured out what exactly they want to do. And that makes sense. It leaves room for Boruto to potentially have multiple Resengans, and for his path to less be like Naruto's and just adding these crazy, make everything big, or, he finally gains a little bit of technical prowess and it just expands his jutsu reign greatly. With Boruto, it seems like they're going to go down the path of him having more of a technical prowess, of having multiple chakra natures, and he'll be able to have like a lightning style Resengan, a water style Resengan, wind style Resengan, and so on. And I think that's a good way to differentiate Boruto from Naruto. Now, obviously, we'll get into Boruto, like what we're dealing with right now in terms of Boruto's powers in the manga. But in terms of just his normal jutsu, I think this is actually a pretty good path to go down with him. Of like, use the fact that he is talented in a way that Naruto kind of wasn't, and he's going to develop some of the more technical jutsu better than Naruto could. So that's pretty good. I do wonder how many episodes, like I said, that this training arc is going to go on for, because I feel like what they need to do is less, it's just training to get one jutsu, and it's more of, during their training here, they will develop a couple of extra jutsu, because this is going to have to be their sort of like power up for the next while, because pretty much once we enter the next manga arc, it is pretty much like boom, 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 boom. Not a lot of room for like extra training. So if like Boruto developed other jutsu, Sarada developed other jutsu, I wouldn't have any issue with that at all. Because like Kakashi showed off like his purple lightning, and it's kind of like, why can't Boruto learn that? Because I think it was established at some point that like it might have been like the data book, or was it the data page for Boruto in volume 1 or something like that, made it clear that Boruto can do purple lightning or something like that. Again, those are weird because it says Moegi has wood style, and we've never seen her use wood style, so it's hard to judge some of that stuff. But that's what I feel needs to happen. That, like I said, but Boruto seems to have gotten the core of this jutsu down. It's now going to be about, I suppose, consistency. Like, how many of these can you actually do with your chakra level? Does he have to use the shadow clone every single time, or is he going to train to learn it without? So my guess is that the next episode probably will be a little bit more Sarada focused than Boruto. They'll maybe switch up the focus a bit. But one thing that was sort of similar across both of them was that during the moment where they were both really struggling with their training, they both reflect on why they're doing this and what is driving them to get stronger. And for both of them, it is to basically make up for the fact that Mitsuki had to come in and defend them and he got injured. And they are not going to let that happen again. They won't be the weak links in the team anymore. And they might be able to save Mitsuki like he did to them at some point in the future. So that's really good. I suppose it does beg the question of what are we going to see with regards to Mitsuki's like recovery, and then if he is going to get any sort of training or power boost style stuff. Because again, you'd want to see him eventually get to a point where like you're not meant to use your Sage mode, but shouldn't that be an option to use at some point, or is it forever going to be a technique he can't use without hurting himself? That's what I want to see. But Mitsuki's return into the next couple of episodes is I think going to be a pretty interesting moment to see where he goes. The other side of the episode was Konohamaru and Mugino investigating Victor. And it was kind of interesting the way they went with this, of like, oh, they're straight up having a meeting with him after they fought each other. But Victor frames it in a way where it's like, oh, you were just ninja doing your job, so the fact that we had a fight is just, it was in the middle of the mission. You're not on that mission anymore, so we can still be on good terms. And Konohamaru, to keep the conversation going, accepts this, even though Mugino, you can tell, is upset about what's happened here. And for the most part, the core of this conversation amounts to, what are you using the Hashirama cell for? And he's kind of just like, well, I run a medical facility, so something related to that, but he doesn't go into specifics. And it is the more like hidden secret development that his company is doing. And he just commits to the idea of like, no, it's our Hashirama cell. You say it comes from your first Hokage, but, it was in our container, we got it, it's ours. And it's obviously not the best logic, but he has possession of it right now, and they would have to fight him and his whole company basically to get it back. So where the research goes from here is going to be quite interesting, because again, manga readers know where we're ultimately getting towards and what they're, I suppose, shortly about to introduce, but we don't really know the significance of like the Hashirama cell exactly just yet. So there's some new stuff that's going to happen here that we're not familiar with, but we're also setting up for the next manga arc, like I said earlier. And yeah, we just end with Victor wants them gone. They feign like they're going to leave, but they're actually sneaking around the facility still. So, what I suppose the setup here for the next few episodes is, what is the significance of the Hashirama cell to Victor and his company? What are they trying to do with it? Does it relate to Kara, or is this going to be more of a setup for something along the lines of, again, they've begun to emphasize it a little bit more with them walking by and seeing the prosthetic arms and stuff like that. Victor has a prosthetic leg, or peg leg, whatever way you want to say it. Is the Hashirama cell to restore missing limbs? Is that what the research is about here? We'll have to see. But I think that's most of what I want to talk about with this episode. Yeah, like it was just very, very fun to see this training come up again. And even though I suppose if you're really into Naruto and Boruto, you know all the stuff about Chakra Natures at this point. We probably know it on a more technical level than they present it here. But it was still cool to see it in action here, seeing Boruto try and create his own wind-style Resengan and, see him actually get it. The Sharingan training will be interesting to see how that works, because especially with Sarada, we know that the path they seem to be going down with her is more that she is potentially going to be one of maybe the first Uchiha to unlock the powers of her eyes, without it needing to be sort of tragic events that cause it. Because we already saw that, like, she basically awakened her Sharingan through a slightly different situation than we've seen before. It would be cool to see something different happen in that sense, because, like, I suppose thinking long term, she's going to, I suppose, have to get the Mangekyo Sharingan eventually. Is someone close to her going to have to die to make that happen? And then for her to get like the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan, how's that going to work? Like with the very small amount of Uchiha that we have, like especially with like Sasuke, like he only has one Sharingan eye, so Sarada's in a very kind of interesting spot, I suppose, when it comes to that sort of stuff. But we'll have to wait and see, I suppose. That's a while off at this point. We're not quite at that level of power just yet. She's still trying to get this second Tomoe. But these are the questions I suppose we will be considering eventually, as especially where we are in the manga right now. I think that's much more heavily on our minds. But yeah, very strong episode. I'm excited for the next one. And yeah, the anime, is on a good run at the moment, and let's hope it continues. right up until the end of this sort of pre-next manga arc, and it goes straight into the next manga arc, which should be really exciting. But yeah, they're my thoughts on the episode. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts were, but that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.